The night was unusually quiet. The hum of the ceiling fan above me filled the still air, its slow, rhythmic creak the only sound in my dimly lit apartment. Outside, the city pulsed with life, distant car horns, muffled laughter from the bar across the street. But inside, everything felt frozen in time. I lay on my bed, staring at my phone's screen, the soft blue light reflecting off the ceiling. My thumb hovered over his name. Ryan. A name that had become a constant in my life. A name that carried weight. We had been friends for years, inseparable even, the kind of bond that felt effortless, like we had known each other in another life. Ryan was the guy everyone wanted to be around, confident, charming, undeniably attractive, and straight. At least, that's what he always said. A soft breeze drifted in through the open window, carrying with it the scent of rain on hot pavement. Summer storms were brewing, the sky heavy with the promise of thunder. Something about the air felt charged, electric, like a storm waiting to break. Then a buzz. My phone lit up. "Ryan, you up?" A simple message, but it sent a ripple through me. I hesitated before typing back. "Yeah, what's up?" Seconds passed, then minutes. My screen remained dark. No reply. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. Something about his message felt off. It wasn't like him to text this late without a reason. Another buzz. This time, a different kind of message. "Ryan, can I come over?" I swallowed hard. Something was definitely off. I stared at the message, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. "Can I come over?" Ryan never asked to come over this late. Usually, if we hung out, it was planned basketball at the park, grabbing food, sitting around talking about nothing. But this was different. I could feel my heart start to race as I typed back. "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" The 3 dots blinked on the screen, then disappeared, then nothing. I exhaled, setting my phone down and rubbing the back of my neck. The room suddenly felt warmer, the air thick despite the breeze. I got up, pacing toward the window, looking out into the night. Streetlights bathed the sidewalk in pale gold, stretching long shadows across the pavement. A few cars rolled by, but no sign of Ryan. Then, as if on cue, headlights cut through the dark. A black car pulled up to the curb outside my building. Ryan's car. I swallowed hard, watching him step out. He stood there for a moment, unmoving, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. Even from up here, I could see something was wrong. A second later, my phone buzzed again. "Ryan, I'm here." I turned from the window, my pulse drumming against my ribs. I went to the door, hesitated for half a second, then unlocked it and pulled it open. The hallway light flickered slightly as Ryan stepped inside. He looked different. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something restless, uneasy. His gray hoodie hung loose over his frame, his dark jeans damp from the humidity outside. His blonde hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Hey." His voice was quiet, almost distant. He stepped inside, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. "Sorry for just showing up. I didn't know where else to go." I shut the door behind him. "You want to sit?" He nodded, moving to the couch. He sat heavily, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor. Something was wrong. I sat across from him. "What's going on?" Ryan inhaled sharply, then let it out in a slow, controlled breath. His leg bounced slightly, a nervous tick I'd only seen a few times, usually before a big game or a tough conversation with his dad. He started, then stopped, his jaw tightening. "I don't know, man. My head's just messed up." I frowned. "Messed up how?" He finally looked at me. His green eyes were dark, clouded with something I couldn't read. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. I swallowed. "What do you mean?" Ryan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Forget it. It's stupid." "No, it's not." I leaned forward. "Talk to me." He exhaled again, rubbing his hands together. His fingers were tense, restless. "I went out with the guys tonight," he said, finally. "Just, usual stuff. Beers, shooting pool, talking shit." I nodded, waiting. And then he stopped again, clenching his jaw. Then we ended up at this other bar. Not the usual spot. A strange feeling crept up my spine. What kind of bar? Ryan hesitated. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. I suddenly knew. You went to a gay bar, I said softly. His head snapped up, eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick, charged. The storm outside had started to roll, in distant thunder rumbling in the background. Ryan's voice was tight. We didn't mean to go there. It was just one of the guys thought it'd be funny, like a joke or whatever. He let out a hollow laugh, but it wasn't funny. I felt my fingers curl slightly against my knee. What happened? Ryan licked his lips, his gaze flickering away. Nothing. At first, we got drinks, sat in the corner, just watching. But then, he trailed off, exhaling sharply. I already knew what he was going to say, but I didn't say anything. I let him find the words himself. There was this guy, he said finally. He was, I don't know, man, just different, confident. He knew who he was, you know? I nodded slowly. Ryan's leg was bouncing again. He came up to me, started talking. He knew I wasn't. He cut himself off. Wasn't what? I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan clenched his jaw. He knew I wasn't supposed to be there. But he also knew I didn't want to leave. My breath caught slightly. Ryan's eyes flickered back to mine, something raw and vulnerable in them. I didn't stop him when he touched my arm. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. I swallowed hard, and Ryan dragged a hand down his face, and I let him buy me a drink. I let him talk to me. I let him, his voice faltered. I let him look at me like I was something he wanted. My heart was pounding now, loud in my ears. Ryan laughed, but it was humorless, bitter. And the worst fucking part, is that I liked it. Thunder rumbled louder outside. The storm was closer now. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was dry. Ryan stood, abruptly, pacing toward the window. His hands were in his hair, his whole body tense. I don't know what's wrong with me, he muttered. I shouldn't have felt like that. I shouldn't have wanted. Ryan. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. He turned, his face twisted in something close to panic. I'm not, his voice broke. He shook his head, almost like he was trying to convince himself. I'm not like that. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unspoken. I took a slow breath, then another. You don't have to be anything, Ryan. He let out a sharp breath, running a hand down his face. His voice was hoarse. I don't know what's happening to me. I stood up, stepping toward him. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the tension thrumming between us. Ryan's gaze lifted to mine, something desperate in his eyes. And then, a loud crack of thunder split the sky. The lights flickered, and, in that fraction of a second, Ryan took a shaky breath and reached for my hand. Ryan's fingers barely brushed mine, but it was enough to send a jolt through my entire body. His touch was hesitant, unsure, like he wasn't even aware he was doing it, or maybe he was, and that was the problem. The air between us crackled, charged like the storm raging outside. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. The thunder rumbled again, closer this time, vibrating through the walls. The flickering light from the street cast shifting shadows across Ryan's face, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the way his throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His eyes, green, darkened by something unreadable, locked onto mine. Ryan, my voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. His fingers flexed, as if testing the weight of the moment. Testing me. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, his voice tight, almost broken. I exhaled slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. Then why are you here? Ryan flinched slightly, as if he hadn't expected the question. His gaze dropped to our hands, where our fingertips barely touched. He hesitated. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he let his palm press fully against mine. The contact sent a sharp, electric thrill up my arm. I could feel the heat of him, the tension coiling in his body like a live wire. He wasn't pulling away, but he wasn't saying anything either. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. Ryan. His eyes flickered up again, and for the first time, I saw it, raw, unfiltered fear. Not fear of me, fear of himself. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. You don't have to. I started, but he cut me off. I do. His voice was barely above a whisper, rough around the edges. I do. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face for a split second, his furrowed brow, the way his lips parted slightly, the sheer weight of whatever this was pressing down on him. And then, before I could say anything, before I could think, he moved. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But he was closer. Too close. His breath was warm against my lips, uneven, hesitant. His eyes flickered between mine, searching for something, permission, reassurance, a way out. I wasn't sure which one he wanted more. I could feel my own breath hitch, my pulse hammering in my throat. Every nerve in my body screamed for clarity, for certainty, but there was none. Just this moment, stretched tight, between us, threatening to snap. Tell me to stop, Ryan murmured. It wasn't a plea. It was a challenge. I couldn't. I should have. But I didn't. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And then, he closed the distance. It was barely a kiss, more hesitation than action, the lightest brush of his lips against mine, as if testing the ground beneath him before stepping off the edge. And then he did step off. His hand came up, gripping the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair, and the hesitation shattered. The kiss deepened, urgent, desperate, a contradiction of need and denial colliding all at once. His body pressed forward, his weight tipping into me, and suddenly we weren't standing anymore. The couch was behind me, or maybe I had backed into it. I wasn't sure. All I knew was the feeling of his hands, his breath, the heat radiating from his skin. And then, he froze. Like a switch had flipped inside him. Ryan's entire body went rigid. His breathing was sharp, uneven. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask, to plead for an explanation. But before I could form a single word, he shoved himself back. Hard, like he had been burned. His chest rose and fell in erratic bursts. His wide, panicked eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, it looked like he might say something. But then, he turned and walked straight out the door, leaving me breathless, confused, and completely, utterly wrecked. The door slammed shut behind him, and just like that, he was gone. I sat there, still breathless, my body caught between heat and cold. My lips still tingled from where he had touched them, but the space around me felt hollow, vacant, like something had been ripped away before I even had the chance to hold it. The room was silent except for the distant patter of rain against the window, the last remnants of the storm fading into the night. My fingers curled into fists against my thighs, my pulse still racing, my mind screaming with 1,000 things I should have said. But what could I have said? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, exhaling sharply. Ryan had kissed me, and then he ran. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the ache in my chest, but it sat there, heavy, suffocating. What had that been for him? A mistake? A moment of weakness? For me, it had been everything. I squeezed my eyes shut, my head pounding. I wanted to call him, text him, something, but I knew he wouldn't answer. I knew Ryan, and I knew how he worked. He would shut down, close himself off, pretend nothing had happened. Maybe by morning he would have convinced himself it hadn't. The thought sent a sharp pain through my ribs. I forced myself up, walking toward the window. The sidewalk below was empty now. No sign of him, no headlights in the distance, just wet pavement glistening under the streetlights, washed clean by the storm. Maybe that's what Ryan wanted, to wash this away, pretend it had never touched him. But it had. And now, I had no idea what that meant for us. I barely slept. I woke up to my phone sitting blank on my nightstand. No messages, no missed calls. I should have expected it, but it still stung. The hours dragged. I went through the motions, showering, making coffee, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything. But my mind stayed stuck on one thing. Ryan. Where he was. What he was thinking. Whether he was okay. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I sent a message. Me. You don't have to talk, but just tell me you're okay. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. By late afternoon, I was ready to give up. Then, a message. Ryan, I'm fine. Just need space. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. Fine. That was a lie. Ryan didn't get quiet when he was fine. He got quiet when he was breaking. I wanted to push, to tell him we needed to talk, to demand an explanation for why he had kissed me, why he had left, why he couldn't even face me now. But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed down the lump in my throat and typed back, "Me, okay. I'm here when you're ready." I stared at the screen, hoping for something, anything in return. But there was nothing. Just silence. Days passed. Ryan didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. I told myself I wouldn't wait for him, that I wouldn't let myself spiral over a single moment. A kiss, a mistake, whatever he wanted to call it. But the truth was, I was waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to undo the distance he'd put between us, waiting for him to stop pretending that night hadn't happened. Because for me, it had changed everything. I tried to go about my life, tried to pretend I wasn't checking my phone every few minutes, but Ryan had left a void in the spaces where he used to be. He wasn't just a friend. He was a constant. And now he was gone. It was late when it happened. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the TV, some random show playing in the background. I wasn't watching it. I was just sitting there, lost in my own head. Then, a knock. I stiffened, my heart slamming against my ribs. No one knocked this late. I got up slowly, walking toward the door. My fingers hovered over the handle as I took a breath. Then I opened it. Ryan stood there. His hoodie was pulled up over his head, his hands shoved into his pockets, but his face, his eyes gave him away. He looked exhausted, hollow, and scared. My throat tightened. "Ryan, I don't know who I am anymore." His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him that he didn't have to have all the answers right now. But before I could say anything, he stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. And then in the dim light of my apartment, he looked at me, really looked at me. Tell me I didn't ruin everything. I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't know how to answer that, because maybe he had, or maybe this was just the beginning.